0800 33 22 83. Text 5050. All right. Well, as you know, we all have our views on Ashley, Sir, as he is now. Lord knows that's ridiculous, but there you go. They give him away for rugby players, so you might as well give them to him as well, civil servants too. When Sir Ashley Bloomfield, we all have our views on his effectiveness and the message he gave to all of us during the COVID pandemic response of the last 3 years. He retired from that position as Director General of Health, as Public Health Officer and Director General of Health. And one of his last things to do, he was given the power by the government, was to be able to instruct councils throughout New Zealand to fluoridate their water supply. Now, 14 councils, I'm not sure which one they are, our next guest I'm sure will tell us, 14 councils who had up until then democratically chosen not to fluoridate their water supply. And I'm not an fluoridator person, so it's okay. You know, you're not dealing with an activist here from me. But nevertheless, I do believe in local democracy. But 14 councils who hadn't fluoridated their water supply in New Zealand were instructed to do so. And that was the end of it. So local democracy was removed and the bureaucrats in Wellington determined otherwise. And so this Community Fluoridation Act, I think it was 2021, gave the Director General of Health the power to direct local authorities to add or not to add fluoride to a drinking water supply. Lord knows when they would have, in actual fact, said not to add, but there you go. The idea of the legislation, according to the Ministry of Health, is to ensure a quote-unquote a nationally consistent approach to community water fluoridation based on its well-established health benefits. Well, a group of, one presumes, anti-fluoride people, here they are, here's the directions to fluoridate, I've got them now. A group of 14 councils in July of last year, 14 of them, were instructed that they had to put them in, and that they had until June of this year to comply, or presumably they would be found in breach and subject to prosecution. Others had a little bit longer. I see the Auckland Council, the Waiuku ward of the Auckland Council, had until 2026, but most were required to fluoridate either this year or next. And they included a range of councils. I see the small ones like Kauro, the big ones like New Plymouth, the small ones like the Tararua, and the big ones like Tauranga, for example. So you can see quite a range of councils there. Now, a group of folk took their New Zealand, or the Ministry of Health, and the Director General in particular, to the High Court, and they said, this is illegal. Last Friday, they won. To come and talk to us about this, and I'm sure she was involved in some way, is Mary Byrne of Fluoride Free New Zealand, and she joins us now. Mary, welcome to the show. Lovely to have you on.
Oh, thank you, Michael. Thanks for having me on.
Now, you're Fluoride Free New Zealand, but were you part of this legal action against the Director General of Health?
No, we weren't part of it. So, we know who they are and everything like that, and some of our members have spoken to them because, we've been studying this subject for a long time, so we've got a lot of background and evidence on it.
So did you were you involved at all in submitting evidence on this matter?
No.
So this group, how did they actually head off to the court without you?
Well, I mean, we've got an extensive website with a lot of information, so they would have been looking at a lot of the research that we've looked at, and we have sent them things. We've sent things like the National Toxicology Program review from the USA, all sorts of information about fluoridation. We've sent it into them so that they're completely aware of it all.
So why wouldn't they have involved you in this court action? Did they come to you at all prior to and ask?
Oh, we know them informally, but we're not part of the team doing the case. So yes, we talk to them and everything.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
So they won last Friday, but they won on a sort of legal technicality. So it's not going to necessarily, as I understand, stop the fluoridation of those 14 councils. It just sends the decision back to the Director of General of Health to consider, as I read the judgment, and I'll be interested in your views, to consider the Bill of Rights Act before they make their final decision. Is that how you read it as well?
Yeah. So the Supreme Court in 2018 in New Zealand ruled that fluoridation was compulsory medical treatment and it violated Section 11 of the Bill of Rights, which is our right to informed consent to medical treatment.
Mm-hmm.
So that's established in our law in New Zealand. So what that meant was that the Director General should have done a consideration of to explain why he felt it was okay to override that fundamental right. So, as you most probably know, Section 5 of the Bill of Rights allows any of our other rights to be overridden if it is deemed to be a reasonable limitation in a free and democratic society. So, when you look at the ruling that the judge made, he's saying that every decision maker should consider the Bill of Rights, but there would be different onus depending on who you were and how big the effect on other people was. So if you were the librarian and you were telling someone they couldn't be in the library because of their T-shirt, he would expect that the librarian would give some sort of nod to the Bill of Rights, but they wouldn't actually have to know the actual wording of the Bill of Rights. And then it would go upwards, depending on the severity. So the judge says, at the top end, if you had a tribunal making a decision that affected a lot of people, he would expect an extensive review of the Bill of Rights or extensive consideration. So my view is that for the Director General to say that he's justified in overriding a basic human right, like our right to informed consent to medical treatment for every single New Zealander, then I would feel that is the top end. So he should have done an extensive consideration of the Bill of Rights. So explaining, why he thinks that Section 5 should be engaged. So it's going to go back to the Ministry of Health. Now, the ruling says that the Ministry of Health and New Health New Zealand could come to an agreement of what that consequence is. So the New Health New Zealand are saying that they want the directive to be put aside, to be suspended. Now, if that doesn't happen, the judge said he will make a ruling, and we think that the judge will make a ruling that those directives should be suspended. That's our guess on, our view. We think that that's likely. So if that happens, then we think that the councils of New Zealand the councils that have been directed, they need to stop continuing with trying to put in the fluoridation infrastructure, etc., because we think that the ultimate end of this is that fluoridation will become illegal. We don't think that the Director General really has a leg to stand on when it's properly reviewed in the full light of day.
I'm not so sure I agree with that. I'll explain why. I agree the Supreme Court upheld the Bill of Rights Act and it needed to apply before decisions. So, and you talk about, you're right, the right to the section that says the right to refuse medical treatment or etc. And so I don't have a problem with what the Bill of Rights Act says or your interpretation. But my understanding of the Health Fluoridation of Drinking Water Amendment Act 2021 of 2 years ago, that piece of legislation, Mary, was that they were trying to this was the government, get around that judgment and therefore directly give the Director General of Health the ability to direct local authorities to add fluoride to drinking water supply. Do you not see it that way?
No, I think that this latest ruling overrides that.
No, but all it says is that when he made the decision, this is Ashley Bloomfield, as the Director General when he went out, that he didn't consider it before he made his final decision. It doesn't say that the Bill of Rights Act will override whatever decision he might weigh. And it's clearly obvious that Parliament intended that he should have that power to direct local authorities to add fluoride to water supply.
Yeah, so the judge is saying that he should have given consideration.
Correct.
Right, and
that's right. Yeah.
He didn't give consideration.
That's correct.
So, yeah, and then there is a substantive hearing that's going to follow on from this. This is part of that substantive hearing. So it's our view that in the substantive hearing that the likelihood is that they will find that it should be illegal rather than legal.
No, I don't read it. Okay, fair enough. I don't read it that way, because why would Parliament legislate to give the Director General of Health and this the power to direct local authorities? Why? I mean, Parliament clearly intended that he should have or she should have that power. Yeah. Yeah, I agree. But New Zealand are. But New Zealand, the Bill of Rights Act's not an overwhelming piece of legislation. So it's something that if you recognise, yes, we know this is in contravention of whatever section of the Bill of Rights Act, but we consider that there are greater health advantages to do it than not. Yeah.
Well, yeah, it has to be a justified limitation, and so the New Health New Zealand are arguing that it's not a justified limitation.
Okay. Well, can I also take you to the Act itself? The Director General is required to consider, and he didn't consider the Bill of Rights Act, and the judge pulled him up and said, well, you have to. But he also said the Director General is required to consider scientific evidence on the effectiveness of adding fluoride to drinking water and reducing the prevalence and severity of dental decay, and whether the benefits of adding fluoride to drinking water outweigh the costs, taking into account the oral health inside the community as well as the financial costs, including ongoing management and monitoring. So there's a third bullet point that's been added to that now by the court, isn't it? And that is, and you've also got to consider the Bill of Rights of those people who are being, in your words, mass medicated against their will.
Yeah, and it's not just my words. That's what the 2018 Supreme Court ruled. They ruled that it was compulsory medical treatment.
That's true, but they didn't... Well, no, I've got a Supreme Court judgment here confirming that fluoridation of drinking water does not breach an individual's right to refuse to undergo medical treatment. No,
it says definitely. Sean Elias said that there were 5 judges on the Supreme Court.
That's right, yeah.
And, one of them said that it should be legal, that the councils had a legal right. Sean Elias thought that the councils didn't have a legal right, but she also said it engaged Section 11 of our, our right to informed consent to medical treatment. And then the other 3 judges, they also all agreed on that. And that's why that is now the law in New Zealand, that fluoridation is compulsory medical treatment that violates Section 11. So that's why the judge has been able to say this is the law, that it does violate Section 11, so therefore now you have to provide an explanation of why, say the Director General, why he thinks that Section 5 should be engaged and that right could be limited.
I've got in front of me the Supreme Court judgment. And also their press release that they accompany it. They're quite good now, actually. Mary, they actually put out a press statement to try and explain what they've said in legal words for us, for people like you and me and everybody else to us actually understand what they're saying. You're quite right, Sean Elias didn't agree. That's the Chief Justice. That the council, in this particular case Pātea, had any statutory authority to fluoridate water supplies. However, on the question of whether the addition of fluoride to the water supply engaged the right to refuse to undergo medical treatment under Section 11 of the Bill of Rights Act, the Chief Justice, Glazebrook, O'Regan and Alan France, all those justices held that it did. Even having regard to the genesis of Section 11 of the Bill of Rights Act, there was no basis to read down its text so as to exclude medical treatment which occurs outside of a therapeutic relationship. And they then held that The practical outcome of the council appeal is that in accordance with the respective views of O'Regan, Alan France, William Young, the council has legal authority to fluoridate the water supplies in Patea and Waverley, and that power is not constrained by Section 11 of the Bill of Rights Act.
Yeah.
So by a majority, they decided that it could be done.
Yeah, that's because two of those judges believe that it engaged Section 5. So the first judge, he thought that it should be legal already, and then the other two said that it engaged Section 5 and that it was a justifiable limitation. So that's how you get a majority saying that it was still okay to fluoridate.
Correct, that's right. And so the majority of the Supreme Court said it's still okay to fluoridate. Even noting that the Bill of Rights Act exists, which is why I go back to why you're so insistent that this judgment will mean that those 14 councils won't, because I'm just thinking this is just a process. This is just a process that he went through too quickly. He'll go back, observe the process, and those 14 councils will still fluoridate. You don't agree?
Okay. Well, why I think that is because I think if he was to give serious consideration and have to explain why this important right of ours should be limited, I think that he wouldn't be able to justify that, because what we've seen in the directive out of those councils, they said that they rely on the Cochrane Collaboration review, and then they rely on the 2014 Chief Science Advisors Report and the 2021 Chief Science Advisors Report. Now, the Cochrane Collaboration, that was only to look at fluoridation and tooth decay. It didn't look at safety whatsoever. And what it said was that, it appears that fluoridation reduces dental decay somewhat in young children. But then it had a whole lot of caveats. And it said, however, the studies were old, prior to 1976, before we had fluoride toothpaste. They said 97% of the studies were biased. They said there was no evidence that it was good for adults. There was no evidence that it stopped fluoridation, dental decay increases, and especially it said there was no evidence that it reduced inequalities. So my reading of the Cochrane Collaboration, the conclusion I come to is that tells us, we don't really need fluoridation.
Okay. I would take a fundamentally different interpretation to you, and I think that's explicit in the government legislation of 2 years ago. But let's forget about that. Let's forget about that. Let's progress that disagreement, because one presumes that when the Director General, as I think, will go back and still direct the fluoridation to those 14 waters, but just tick that particular box as he or she does, will you then be challenging that decision as well in the courts? I mean, you haven't challenged it up until now, but will you be a part of the new health legal judgment or legal challenge?
No, we won't be part of it. New Health New Zealand will continue with it. But, also adding on to this discussion about why we think that they would, the courts will end up thinking it was illegal, is it's not just about effectiveness, it's also about the safety, and then they have to, weigh up their so-called effectiveness against safety. And now where we are in 2023, the National Toxicology Program from the USA has put out a big
can I just say, but it's not going to work. I mean, I understand your anti-fluoridation argument, but the reason I asked you on the show was, in actual fact, to talk about this particular judgment and next steps. I would disagree entirely with what you're going to say, because I'm aware of that judgment as well. All I'm interested in is what steps you're taking. I don't quite understand, though, why you'd stand outside, if you're so opposed to fluoridation, Mary, why you'd stand outside trying to join in legal action against the Director General. Is it the cost?
Well, the cost, sure. We're just a voluntary organisation.
Okay.
So, we don't have any big funding. So, otherwise, sure, I would be part of it if I had lots of money. But, Yeah, I mean, it just comes down to opinion right now, doesn't it, which way we think it would all go.
No, no, it's an opinion, though, that somebody's going to have to make, because the Director General of Health isn't giving up on fluoridation. They still believe manifestly that it is in the best interests of these communities, particularly where there are communities of low income and a poor uptake of fluoride generally in the population, and they think that this is the most effective way of doing that. I can't see them abandoning. I can't see them abandoning that, Mary.
Well, I think it would be abandoned if we got, if we had full transparency and people were aware of the details. When in 2011 and 2013, we held tribunals in, well, the New Plymouth.
Who's we held tribunals?
No, sorry, it wasn't we. It was the New Plymouth District Council held a tribunal, 2011, and then the Hamilton City Council in 2013. And that meant we were part of that. Now, when the whole issue is discussed, then people get to see the details, they get to see the arguments and the counter-arguments and the counter-arguments. And once that is out in the open, I think that most people come to the conclusion that fluoridation is neither safe or effective, and that, I mean, you're saying here that it's helping the poor children, but the Cochrane Collaboration says that it doesn't reduce inequality.
But I'm sorry, I'll take the Ministry of Health's evidence over that one, though. I mean, the Ministry of Health have made it very, very clear that it does, which is why the Director General has ordered 14 councils to fluoridate the water supply, because they are saying that the health benefits clearly outweigh any risk factor the other way.
I know, but what I'm saying is their evidence doesn't say that. They're presenting the Cochrane Collaboration as evidence that it is good for poor children. But the Cochrane Collaboration...
I'm not interested in the Cochrane Collaboration, though. I mean, that is not authoritative. Yeah, but it's not authoritative.
But why are the Ministry of Health using it as evidence if it's not authoritative?
Well, they're not. They are relying... They're relying upon a lot of an awful lot of...
No, they're not. I've read it.
Yes,
if you go read the directive, so if you look on our website, you can go in and you can see the letters that the Ministry of Health has sent to the councils, and they've said they're relying on the Cochrane Collaboration in the 2009 Oral Health Survey.
I have to be honest with you, that's none of their legal papers that they submitted on this particular issue as to the benefits of fluoridation.
I'm not saying that. I'm saying that is in the directives that they sent to the council.
Again, again, that's simply incorrect. I'm looking at those directives now, and none of them mention the Cochrane Collective. I've got the letters in front of me, from the Director General of Health to those 14 councils. And not one of them mentions the Cochrane Collaboration.
I think they do.
No, go ahead.
I would have to look at it.
You go back and have... listen. I'm looking at the letters right now from Ashley Bloomfield. It's 2 pages, and they mostly talk about what the costs are in those directives.
Well, you might be looking at a different letter then, perhaps.
Well, I'm looking at the directive that it's before the court.
Okay, I wonder if that was a different letter that was before the court than what we saw that was sent to the actual councils.
Well, that's the same directive. That's the only letter that those councils received from the Ministry of Health that gave them the directives. That's why it was evidence before the High Court.
Okay. I would have to get that myself.
You go back and have a look at it, and we'll be more than happy to go and talk with you again in the future. But I can just say that I'm looking at those directives now. Thank you very much for joining us. That is Mary Byrne from Fluoride Free New Zealand, commenting on the judgment last Friday of the Director General of Health, who got there a bit too quick. Having said that, it wasn't entirely his fault, and I don't usually make excuses for Ashley Bloomfield, but if you look at the legislation, He is required by law to consider a number of things in that 2021 legislation. None of them says the Bill of Rights Act. Now, he probably should have known that because the Bill of Rights Act applies to everything, even if it's not specifically directed, as we know. It is 5 to 12. Kane, good morning to you.
How you going, Michael?
Good.
Just on the fluoridation issue, the answer is actually the Scotland Child Smile program. So what they use in non-fluoridated Scotland is a program where they teach toothbrushing in schools, they have healthy eating in schools.
Yeah, but they don't have Maoris in Scotland.
No, but they did have terrible teeth, Michael. And if you look at the stats, there's been a halving of the number of general anaesthetics operations regarding removing teeth. So if you look at the numbers, you'll actually see a halving of general anaesthetics operations.
Yeah, but I'm going to, again,
focusing on in New Zealand.
I'm going to, there are no water, you're absolutely right, there are no water fluoridation schemes in Scotland. Okay? You're absolutely right, there are none.
Yep.
But they do not have large numbers of Maori population living in Scotland who, particularly of the young children, so that makes New Zealand unique. I don't understand why you'd use that.
Yeah, forget Maori.
I can't forget Maori, because that's why you're fluoridating the water in this country.
Just
you're not listening properly to me.
Please, 1 second, just take out that, just look at the stats of Scotland Child Smile program and what it has done. It has halved the number of general anaesthetic operations. Now, this is what we need in New Zealand. We needed a targeted approach, dental teaching in schools, toothbrushing programs, all that sort of thing. That's what's going to work. So we need to look at what works. Fluoridation doesn't actually work. The recent catfish study research project, which took 10 years in Cumbria, showed that there was essentially no difference between fluoridated and non-fluoridated areas. So that's the latest research.
I'm looking right now at the latest research from Scotland, and it says, contrary to what you say, it says it's improved, but it hasn't dealt with. The Scottish Child Smile program showed that tooth decay is a largely preventable disease, but continues to have a miserable impact on individual health and well-being.
Are you on the Child Smile site?
No, I'm actually on the Ministry of Health site in Britain. In fact, I'm not. I'm on the British Dental Journal site. No, I wouldn't know. Why wouldn't I go to the people who actually know?
Yeah, you go to look up childsmile.org.
And I'm also down here. Yeah, but again, I mean, sorry. So I go to people who are going to propagandize, or I go to independent people?
Well, the Child Smile is the UK government. It's the Scotland.
Well, then they're saying, I've got 4 UK chief medical officers here who say that despite Child Smile, they believe water fluoridation is an effective public health intervention for reducing the prevalence of tooth decay. So it's not, it's not an either or. What they're looking at is the Child Smile that you've talked about program and fluoridation to go together. That is the view.
Sorry, Michael, can I speak? So
I'm letting you speak, but I'm just pointing out to you the facts.
I appreciate the facts. So if you look at the catfish study, which was just released in November 2022, they show that there's basically no difference between fluoridated and non-fluoridated areas. This is why I think you'll find that there's been a slowdown in the rollout of fluoridation in the United Kingdom.
Okay.
So you look up the catfish study.
I don't want to look at the catfish study. I just want to look at the official British medical and dental studies that are coming out. Now,
and going back to the Cochrane review, going back to the Cochrane review, which you mentioned in your interview with Mary, you've just been emailed through or text through the Northland direction, and it includes in that direction the Cochrane Collaboration.
It doesn't.
So
I've got a 3-page. No, it's not true. I've got sitting here in front of me. I've got the directive in front of me. I'm not. See, listen to you, Kane. Don't ring again. If you're going to start accusing people of lying. I've got the directive right here in front of me. It's a 3-page directive. It's dated the 27th of July 2022. It's sent to Simon Weston. It's a 3-page letter to them, and it does not include anything to do with the Cochrane study. It just directs them as to what they should do. And that's the problem with these anti-fluoride nutters, that they are more than happy to abuse you if your evidence doesn't fit their preconceptions. It is 1 minute to 12.